The text came in at 7:14 on a Saturday morning. I was still in my robe, standing at the kitchen counter, waiting on the coffee to finish. The house was quiet, the way it only gets early on weekends. No traffic outside, no television. Just the sound of the coffee maker working through its last few gurgles. I had my reading glasses on and I was scrolling through nothing in particular when the message came through. It was from my wife. Not a call. A text. Talked to Savannah this morning. She wants the wedding to be just family. Her real family. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down on the counter, poured my coffee, and stood at the window looking out at the backyard I had spent 3 summers turning into something worth looking at. The oak tree I planted the year we got married was full now. The garden beds along the fence were my wife's idea, but my labour. I had built the pergola myself, post by post, over a long weekend. The summer my knees were still good enough for that kind of thing. I stood there for a long time. Savannah was my stepdaughter. She was 26 years old and getting married in 11 weeks to a man named Brett, who sold medical equipment and thought a firm handshake meant something about a person's character. I had met Brett 4 times. Each time he called me by my first name immediately, before I offered it, which told me everything I needed to know. The wedding was in Asheville, a vineyard venue. The deposit had been paid, by me, 8 months earlier. $3,200, non-refundable. My wife and I had been married for 9 years. I want to be precise about that because I think people hear 9 years and assume a certain settled comfort, a depth of knowing. And there was some of that. There was also a lot of history I had chosen, over and over, to absorb without complaint. That is what you do when you love someone. You absorb things. You tell yourself it will even out. You tell yourself the ledger will balance eventually. I had been telling myself that for a while. Her name is Gloria. She was 49 when we met, recently divorced, and Savannah was 17 at the time. A junior in high school who looked right through me the first time we were introduced, the way teenagers do when they've decided something before you've opened your mouth. I didn't take it personally. I'd been around enough to know that step situations require patience, and I had patience to spare back then. I was 62 years old, retired from 31 years in civil engineering. My own kids, a son named Theodore, who lived in Denver, and a daughter named Patricia, who lived outside of Raleigh, were long grown and had lives of their own. I had a pension, a paid-off house in Greensboro that I'd sold when Gloria and I decided to build something together, and enough energy left to want that something to be real. We bought the house in Wilmington together. Technically, I put in 60% of the down payment and my name went on the mortgage. Gloria was between jobs at the time, transitioning out of a marketing position she'd held for a decade. It made sense. We talked about it like partners. Savannah was in college by then at UNC Wilmington, which was partly why we chose the area. Gloria wanted to be close. I understood that. I supported it. What I did not fully understand until later was that being close to Savannah also meant being close to her father, a man named Craig, who had been largely absent during Savannah's childhood, who had contributed sporadically to her expenses, and who had a talent for reappearing at meaningful moments to collect the emotional credit he hadn't earned. Craig showed up at Savannah's graduation. I had written the check for her final semester's tuition, $6,800, when Craig's promised contribution didn't materialize. He stood in the photos anyway, arm around his daughter, grinning like a man who'd been there all along. I smiled and stood to the side. That was the first time I noticed the pattern clearly. It wouldn't be the last. In the years that followed, I paid for things. That is not me complaining. It is me accounting for what happened. I paid for Savannah's car when hers died, 2 months after graduation. I co-signed her apartment lease when her credit wasn't enough on its own. When she got engaged, Gloria and I sat down together and agreed to contribute $15,000 toward the wedding. That number came from a conversation we had as a couple, and I agreed to it because I wanted Savannah to have a good start. I also, on my own, paid for the venue deposit, and the catering consultation fee, and the dress alterations that ran over what the boutique quoted. These were things Gloria mentioned in passing, and I handled quietly, the way I handle most things. Savannah never said thank you. Not once. Not in a way that registered. She was polite in the way that people are polite to service staff, acknowledging without really seeing. I told myself it didn't matter. The marriage was what mattered. The family we were building. Then Brett proposed, and Savannah started spending more time with Craig, and something shifted in the house in a way I couldn't name at first. Gloria started taking calls in the other room. Savannah started referring to the wedding as her and Mom's project. My name stopped appearing in the conversations that filtered back to me. I noticed. I didn't say anything. That is the thing about being patient for a long time. Eventually, it stops being a virtue and starts being a habit. You absorb the small exclusions because you've absorbed so many that you no longer recognize the accumulation. You're just standing in a kitchen on a Saturday morning wondering when you became optional. The text said real family. I stood at that window for a long time. Then I went to my office, the small room off the hallway that I'd claimed when we moved in, the one with the good light and the bookshelf I built myself, and I sat down at my desk. I didn't open my laptop. I didn't make calls. I just sat there with my coffee going cold, and I thought about the backyard I'd built and the oak tree I'd planted and the $3,200 sitting in a vineyard's bank account in Asheville, North Carolina. I thought about Craig, who would almost certainly be walking Savannah down the aisle. Craig, who I had never said a single negative word about. Not to Gloria, not to Savannah, not to anyone. I thought about Brett, who called me by my first name before I offered it. And then I thought about my son Theodore, who had called me the week before just to talk, the way he does sometimes on Sunday evenings. And my daughter Patricia, who had sent me a photograph of my granddaughter's first day of kindergarten because she knew I'd want to see it immediately. I have real family. I know what it looks like. After a while, I picked up my phone and called my bank. I am not a man who acts out of anger. I want to be clear about that. What I did in the hours that followed was not rage. It was clarity. There is a difference, and I think it matters. I called the bank first and separated the joint savings account, not emptied it, just moved my contributions, which I had tracked carefully, back into my individual account. Gloria had access to a monthly transfer we'd set up for household expenses. I reduced that transfer to cover only the mortgage and utilities, nothing more. Then I called the venue in Asheville. I explained that I was the card holder on the deposit and that there had been a change in the family's plans. The woman I spoke to was professional. She confirmed what I already knew. The deposit was non-refundable. I thanked her and ended the call. Then I called the caterer. The catering consultation had been billed to my card, $400, and I had not yet paid the first installment of the catering contract, which was due the following Friday. I called and explained that the card on file would not be honoring the upcoming charge, and that the family would need to provide a new payment method. The caterer asked if everything was all right. I told her that plans change. Then I sat there for a while longer. I did not respond to Gloria's text. She called at 11:30. I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to have the conversation yet, and I have learned over 62 years that the conversations you have before you're ready almost always make things worse. She called again at 1:45, and again at 3:30. I was in the backyard by then, doing nothing in particular, just sitting on the bench under the pergola. It was a mild afternoon for October. The garden beds needed attention, but I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about what I wanted the rest of my life to look like. That is a question I hadn't asked myself in a long time. I'd been too busy building other people's answers. Gloria came home at 5. She'd been at Savannah's apartment, I assumed, doing whatever it is they do when they close ranks. She came into the backyard and sat across from me at the patio table, and her face was arranged into the expression she uses when she knows she's done something wrong, but hasn't decided yet how sorry she is. I waited. She said she was sorry about the text. She said it came out badly. She said Savannah was under a lot of pressure and that Craig had been inserting himself and she was just trying to manage it. I asked her when she had decided that managing Craig's involvement meant removing mine. She said it wasn't like that. I asked her what it was like then. She didn't have a clean answer for that. She talked around it for a while, about Savannah's feelings, about the optics, about not wanting the wedding to become about something other than the wedding. I listened to all of it. I have always been a good listener. It used to be a compliment I received. Lately, I think I had confused listening with accepting. I told her what I had done, the bank account, the caterer. I told her calmly the way I tell people things when I've already processed them. Her face changed. She said I was being vindictive. I told her I was being accurate. I said, the wedding can still happen. It can happen exactly as planned. I simply won't be paying for a family event I've been told I'm not part of. She said, that's not fair. I asked her at what point she thought the arrangement had become fair. She didn't answer that either. I told her I wasn't angry. I told her I meant that. I said I spent 9 years building something here. I built that pergola. I planted that tree. I have been generous with my money and my time and my patience, and I have asked for very little in return. And the one thing I was asking for, to be treated as a member of this family, apparently doesn't fit the plan. I stood up from the bench. I told her I was going to take some time to think. I told her I had booked a cabin in the Smoky Mountains for 2 weeks, which was true. I had done it that afternoon while sitting in the backyard, not out of spite, because I needed to be somewhere quiet and mine. She asked if I was leaving her. I said I was going to think. The drive to the mountains takes about 5 hours from Wilmington. I left the next morning before she was awake. I left the note on the kitchen counter, brief and civil. I told her I had my phone. I told her the mortgage would be covered. I did not tell Theodore or Patricia where I was going immediately. I called them both from the road, somewhere in the middle of the state, and explained the situation as plainly as I could. Theodore listened without interrupting, which is his way. When I finished, he said, Dad, you know we're always in your corner. Patricia cried a little, not dramatically, just the way she does when she's sad about something she can't fix. She told me she'd always thought I deserved better. I told her that was kind. She said it wasn't kindness. It was just what she'd observed for 9 years. That meant more to me than she probably knew. I arrived at the cabin in the late afternoon. It was a small place, older, with a screened porch that looked out at a ridgeline. I sat on that porch for an hour before I went inside. The trees were turning, orange and yellow and a dark red I don't have the right word for, and the air had that particular mountain coolness that sits in your chest differently than regular air. I had rented the cabin for 2 weeks. I ended up staying for 3. Gloria texted, then called, then texted again. The messages moved through the predictable stages: hurt, then frustration, then something softer, then frustration again. Savannah texted once, which surprised me. The message was short. I hear you're upset. Mom said you pulled the wedding money. That was really hurtful. I read it several times. I thought about how to respond. I wrote, Savannah, I hope you have a beautiful wedding. I genuinely mean that. I also want you to know that I have spent 9 years trying to be a good presence in your life. I paid for your last semester of college when your dad wasn't able to. I co-signed your lease. I paid the venue deposit and the catering consultation. I did those things because I cared, not because I was keeping score. But when your mum sent me that message, I understood something. I can't pay for belonging. Nobody should have to. I wish you and Brett every happiness. I sent it before I could think better of it. She didn't respond. That was fine. I wasn't looking for an argument. I was just done being quiet about things I should have said out loud years ago. I've been asked since then, by Theodore, by a few close friends who knew the situation, whether I regret any of it. Whether the way I handled things was too extreme, too cold. I've thought about that honestly. Here is what I know. I did not yell. I did not threaten. I did not say a single cruel thing to anyone. I simply stopped subsidizing a situation that was costing me more than money. I adjusted the financial arrangements to reflect the reality that had been communicated to me. And I went somewhere quiet to figure out what I actually wanted. That doesn't feel extreme to me. It feels like the thing I should have done a few years earlier. Craig, as I later found out, did walk Savannah down the aisle. Brett's parents covered the catering. The wedding happened. I was not there, and based on everything I understand about that day, nobody missed me in any way that made them uncomfortable. That used to be the kind of thing that would have hurt. Sitting here now, I find I feel something closer to peace about it. Gloria and I separated formally in February. We are not divorced yet. These things take time, and we are both in our 60s and neither of us is in a hurry for the legal machinery of it. We have been civil. The house is on the market. She has been staying with a friend in Raleigh. We have spoken on the phone a few times. Real conversations, the kind you can only have when the defensiveness is worn down and you're just two people accounting for what happened. She told me once that she didn't think she'd handled it right. She said she'd been caught between Savannah and me for years and had always chosen Savannah because she thought I was strong enough to absorb it. I told her she was right, that I was strong enough. I told her that wasn't the point. She said she understood that now. I believe her. It doesn't change much, but I believe her. I am 62 years old. I have a son in Denver and a daughter in Raleigh and a granddaughter who drew me a picture of the two of us that I have taped to the refrigerator in my apartment. I have a pension and my health and a small place near the water that is mine alone, with no pergola to build and no ledger to balance. I think about that oak tree sometimes. I planted it myself. I watered it through 2 dry summers. I watched it grow. It's still there in that backyard whether I am or not. That's the thing about trees. They don't require you to stay. Some things you build are for you. Some things you build are just for the building. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about which is which, and for the first time in a long time, I find that I'm mostly building for myself. There's a moment I keep coming back to, not the text, not the phone calls. It's the oak tree, the one I planted the year Gloria and I got married, the one I watered through 2 dry Carolina summers until it could stand on its own. I think about that tree more than I probably should, because I put real care into something that will outlast the reason I planted it, and I've had to make peace with that. What happened in this story wasn't complicated, even though it felt complicated for a long time. I was generous with people who had decided, somewhere along the way, that my generosity was just the baseline, that it was what I owed them, not something they owed me gratitude for. When you let that go on long enough, when you absorb exclusion after exclusion without naming it, you're not being patient. You're teaching people that there's no cost to treating you that way. I taught that lesson for 9 years without meaning to. That's the thing about character. The real kind, not the performed kind. It's not about being the loudest in the room or the one who wins the argument. It's about knowing what you stand for clearly enough that when someone crosses that line, you don't need to explain yourself at length. You just act from what you know to be true. I didn't yell at Gloria. I didn't send Savannah a bitter message. I made adjustments that reflected reality, and I went somewhere quiet to think. That's not coldness. That's knowing who you are. And I'll tell you something about wisdom that I didn't fully understand until I was past 60. Wisdom isn't what you accumulate from good experiences, it's what you finally extract from the ones that cost you something. Every year I spent telling myself the ledger would balance. That was me choosing comfort over clarity. The intelligent thing, the genuinely clear-eyed thing, would have been to name what I was seeing earlier, to say this dynamic is not healthy, and I am not required to fund it. Intelligence isn't just about being sharp, it's about being honest with yourself, even when honesty is inconvenient. And then there's the matter of what you do with that honesty once you have it. Because understanding something and actually changing your life based on that understanding, those are 2 different things entirely. A lot of people can see clearly and still not move, still not make the call, still not book the cabin. What got me out of that backyard and into those mountains wasn't anger, and it wasn't bitterness. It was just enough. Enough absorption. Enough silence about things that deserve to be spoken. That kind of resolve doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from finally deciding that your own life is worth protecting with the same energy you've been spending protecting everyone else's comfort. I don't know what Savannah makes of any of this now. I don't know if Craig walked her down that aisle and felt proud, or if part of her understood, somewhere quiet, what the day actually cost. That's not mine to know. What I know is that my granddaughter's drawing is on my refrigerator, and Theodore still calls on Sunday evenings, and I wake up in my apartment near the water and feel not happy exactly, not yet, but free. Which at 62 might be the better thing anyway. The tree is still growing. I don't need to be there to tend it anymore.